Hi everyone, welcome back to my top 500 games, and we are now in the top half of the entire list. So we are at number 249, and that is The Sims 2. I never really played much of The Sims overall, but I did play The Sims 2. I got it on PS2. I don't remember exactly why I got it, but I do remember I had played a bit of the original Sims at my dad's house at one time, but I really don't really remember much about it. I mean, I know what it is, obviously, but I don't remember much about that experience. But The Sims 2 is one that I did get on the PS2, and I remember spending a lot of time on it. Well, at least it felt like a lot of time. I remember just, you'd have the default houses, but then I thought, well, that's pretty boring to have the default houses and stuff, so I really like this idea of making my own house and doing all that stuff. Now, of course, one of the things that The Sims is infamous for at this point is torturing people, putting a bunch of people in a room and then removing the doors, or another example, very common example would be making a swimming pool and then removing the ladder once they're in so they can't get out. That type of thing, so you can just watch them all huddled in a room and start wallowing around in their own bodily fluids and watching them cry and then die. There's something there's something very satisfying, I guess, about that very morbid and very macabre sense of humour, I suppose. But that's not something that I did myself. I was more focused on, making the house look nice and making it all interesting and making it all decorated nice. And this idea of interior design as a game mechanic, I liked it and I just had fun with it. Really, there's not much else I can say about it. I mean, of course, there's going to be that issue of you can't afford everything. You can't afford the things that give you the greatest amount of comfort and stuff, but even still, this was not actually one of those games where I was able to play it for ages and accumulate so much money and get all my little Sims married and stuff, even though I'm sure I did that every now and then. But mostly I just like designing the houses and trying to come up with all these nice interesting designs. But even from a gameplay standpoint, I'm not saying this as in I just put things together and thought, ooh, that looks nice. I did like the whole idea of, like things providing so much comfort, and you had to think rather ergonomically, I suppose. Think about like how far it takes to travel from one room to another and all that sort of stuff. And it was something that I was into. Number 248, I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce this. I know there's a few variations of how people do pronounce it. When I was introduced to this game series, I was introduced to it a way that I have not really heard anyone else say it, but I'm going to say it the way that I've heard most commonly, or rather the way that makes most sense to me when looking at it. But anyway, let's get to it. This game is Suikoden 4. Now, my friend Josh, who originally introduced me to this series, always called it Suikoden, but there's an I there, and so I don't really understand how it's a Su, and the Koden, I would understand that, but Suikoden, or Suikoden, I don't think, Suikoden doesn't sound right to me. I would say Suikoden, I suppose. That's the best way I can describe it, but regardless. Now, this series is famous for a few things. For one, it's famous for the whole many characters feature where you can get several different characters all on your team, and the idea is that you have to collect the 108 Stars of Destiny, and it varies between different games in the series. There are also very distinct features of these games. For example, spells being used through runes, and you use runes by equipping them, and each level of the rune will take up one magic slot of however much charges you have of that level, that type of thing. But one of the things that made this game stand out, that made it different, was that this was the only one where you didn't have a party of 6 characters, because usually you have 3 at the front and 3 at the back. But in this game you just had 4 characters. And I discovered that if you had a turbo controller, you could just use an elastic band around the analog sticks or something like that, an elastic band around the X button, and leave it and you could win. Or maybe you didn't need a turbo controller, I don't remember, but I remember you could just set it on auto. The reason for this is because of how you fully queued after a level up. And also it was because of the way that the experience is calculated. It's basically 1,000 experience per level up, and the amount of experience you get depends on the difference between your strength and your enemy's strength. It's kind of messed up in that aspect, I suppose, but enemies will never give you any less than 10 experience levels, so it will take a maximum of 100 battles to get from any level to any other level, and so you can just set it up, and that's what I did. Now, also what this game is known for, and what I suppose the series is known for, are the giant war-like battles, and each game does it separately. This game was very water-based, so they were very naval-based battles, so you had to guide these ships around, but I don't really remember that much detail. But the main thing that sticks out to me about this game is my story behind it, because I got this game on my 18th birthday, and I got quite a few things on my 18th birthday. It's also the day that I got Kingdom Hearts 2, which came out the day before my 18th birthday. So my 18th birthday, that's September 30th, 2006. And I just remember playing this on my birthday and for a while after that. So yeah, that's that. Number 247 is Super Street Fighter 2. This is the Mega Drive version that I had played, and I had already played Street Fighter 2 on the Amiga, but I'm kind of bundling in with this because that's just the rule, I suppose. Like, if there are slight variations on games, I'm going to count them together. It's basically like an extension, I suppose, so yeah, there's that. But I had already played Street Fighter 2 on the Amiga, and my Amiga version of Street Fighter 2 was pretty broken because if ever you played as Guile, or the computer played as Guile, Guile would just appear as this mesh, sort of like a missing no, and the game would just crash. But Super Street Fighter 2 I got on the Mega Drive, and this also introduced a few new characters. It introduced Cammy, T-Hawk, DJ, and Fei Long, and I believe this was the first game I ever got that I actually requested, because every time up until this point, I just got games that I was given. But I remember knowing about Super Street Fighter 2 somehow, and I wanted it, and I got it. And I did play this game quite a bit, but because there's no real progression or any, like, you know, long single player mode outside of just arcade mode, I can't really think of any stories to talk about this, apart from I did play this quite a bit and I enjoyed it. This game was also available at the Childcare Centre that I mentioned quite a few times at this point, but I played it there as well. Next up, we have number 246, The Revenge of Shinobi. But this is a clump, because at number 245 we have Shinobi 3, Return of the Ninja. These are both Mega Drive games, and I actually didn't have Shinobi 3 when I was younger and had a Mega Drive, but I did have Shinobi 2, which is The Revenge of Shinobi. And they both play very similarly, but I would say that Shinobi 3 is the better of the two. I actually had the Revenge of Shinobi on one of those Mega Game bundle cartridges that you could sometimes get, but I have played both since then from emulation and Mega Drive collections and PSN and all that. But again, like Shinobi, it's one of those more slow, methodical ninja games. Although I did learn several years later that you can run by tapping the D-pad in the direction twice rather than just pressing it down. And also, as a feature of this game, you have different powers that you can use. So you can pause the game and select your power, and then you can press, I believe it is A, to unleash that power. So you might have one which is like invincibility for a while, and there's also one which is like a kamikaze thing where you will explode, so it will cost you a life, and your explosion will do loads of damage to the enemies. But like I've said several times before, I really like the precision of these games. I really like that sort of precise aspect where it's not so much about learning different button combinations that you'd have in a fighting game to do a different move. It's not like up, down, left, right, A is a particular shuriken attack, and then right, B, and C is this other weird attack. It's just, no, every button always does the same thing. It's just knowing the right context to use all of those things. And that's what I tend to favour with these games. Now obviously I'm going to have more memories with The Revenge of Shinobi than I do for Shinobi 3, because that was the one that I did have on the Mega Drive. And the main thing that I always remember is the boss that's in the nightclub. So you have this boss who's jumping around all over the place and the walls are flashing different colours and it looks really strange. And also this is one of those games where I can play it now and think, wow, this is really hard. However did I beat these bosses when I was younger, especially that particular nightclub boss that sticks in my mind. Number 244 is Ikaruga. This is a game I only played since the Xbox 360. It's basically one of those scrolling shooting games, but what makes this game stand out is the whole polarity thing, and quite a few games have picked up on this idea since then, but the idea is that you can switch between a sort of light mode and dark mode, and you will shoot out bullets on a colour based on what polarity you are. So if you're in light mode, you'll shoot out these white bullets, and if you're in dark mode, you'll shoot out these black bullets. And also, being a particular type of ship will allow you to completely avoid the bullets of that colour. So say you might have something that's shooting out a load of white bullets and only a few black ones. You can turn into a white ship so that you can more easily avoid the ones that are a threat to you, as opposed to becoming the black ship, which will cause you to be damaged by the massive horde of white bullets. The idea behind this, and it's a very clever idea if we're being completely honest, is that you sort of choose your difficulty setting, because in order to make yourself strong against the enemy and making it so you can get more points, you have to use the colour that will make it harder for you to dodge all the bullets. And so it's sort of like a difficulty setting that you can keep switching, but of course it's also a reflex thing, so you have to be very careful of what colour that you are at the time, so you have to make sure that you can react to that fast enough. It's interesting, certainly very interesting. Although saying that, I couldn't get too far because I'm not that good, or at least I wasn't when I played this game. Number 243 is Voodoo Dice. Now, this is very similar in theme to Devil Dice, which I talked about just not too long ago. And the idea is that you have these dice and you have to roll these dice around in order to get them to different spots. Apart from, this is a purely puzzle-based game, whereas Devil Dice had a puzzle-based element to it, a particular mode, and it was primarily a competitive multiplayer party game. But this one is all about the puzzles, and you have the different theme stages, and you have much bigger levels than what you would have in Devil Dice. And the aim of these games is, once again, to get the dice lined up with the correct numbers. Also, there's a bit of a story behind this game. This is, I believe, it was the first game that I played on my newest TV. When I got my latest TV, it would have been, I guess, 2012, 2013, around that time. And it's a 32-inch TV, but before then I was working on a 22-inch TV, so it was a much larger scale TV. And this was the first game I played on it to really see the difference in the TV sizes. Although, of course, when it comes to things like TV size, it's one of those things you just get used to very quickly. So now I'm just used to my TV, so it doesn't seem that amazing anymore, but that's how it felt like at the time. Now next up, we have number 242. Now this game is Ratchet & Clank Tools of Destruction, but this is a clump. Number 241 is Ratchet & Clank Size Matters, but this is an even bigger clump. At number 240, we have Ratchet & Clank A Crack in Time. That's right, we have a 3-game clump, and this is the first time that this has happened. But yeah, this is interesting, a 3-game clump. So I suppose all I can really do here is talk about how I was introduced to the Ratchet & Clank series. Basically, my brother played the original Ratchet & Clank and he had it. I didn't have it. He had it on the PS2, which was back when it was on the PS2. So it would have been Christmas around 2004, I believe. If I work my memories out, I believe 2004 is the most accurate Christmas date I can assign to it. But regardless, that's not the one I played. I played Tools of Destruction first, and I eventually got Size Matters on the PSP. The one thing I remember specifically about Size Matters is the way that when you level up and your health goes up. And generally speaking, I did enjoy the whole leveling up thing, because that's just a thing I like in general, I suppose. A Crack in Time, which is the one that I am the most familiar with, introduced a time puzzle mechanic, and I just realised I've not really talked about the core of these games. Basically, they're 3D platformers, but there's a lot of focus on, I suppose you could call it gunplay. You get these different weapons, and you can upgrade these different weapons by collecting different bolts, like screws and all that type of stuff, and that's good. But A Crack in Time has this time puzzle thing with it as well, where you can, similar to the misadventures of PB Winterbottom, you can do a thing and then rewind time and do another thing whilst the ghost of the thing you just did does that thing you just did, so that you can line things up. It is pretty cool. I did get to a point in A Crack in Time where it just got really hard and it seemed really hard to get past all of these enemies, but I did eventually beat all those enemies and I did progress through the game. And I also like the fact that there's all these different planets that you can go to and they all provide their own individual challenges, so that was nice. Number 239 is Worms Open Warfare. This is the PSP version of Worms. There also was Open Warfare 2, but this is the one that I played. And basically, it's Worms on the PSP. So I've already described Worms because I was talking about Worms 3D before, and I also briefly mentioned it with Worms Crazy Golf. But Worms, basically, you've got multiple teams of multiple worms. You each take turns controlling one of your worms, and you move around and you aim your different weapons and you shoot. And of course, you've got different types of weapons, like bazookas will cause a big explosion, but they're affected by wind. You've got the shotgun, which does general damage, I guess is the best way to call it. It delivers 2 shots. You've got the homing missile, which is more accurate. The airstrike, which will just fall from the top of the screen and land, and you can teleport. And all these different types of abilities. But my main memory with Worms Open Warfare was playing this game against my friend Josh, because I think this was one of those games where you only needed one copy to play multiplayer. So I would play it on my PSP and he would play it on his PSP, and we could play against each other from my one copy. And that was nice. But I'm going to end this part here. So thank you all for watching. I will see you in the next part. We'll continue on from 238. Goodbye.